pair relationships with animate worlds while building intentional techno-futures. The research spans water sustainability in Jordan, nearshore habitat in the Puget Sound, sea ice melt in Arctic Norway, mega fires in the American West, deep sea mining in the Pacific, and most recently, copper extraction and mythology in Cyprus. They are the 𝐈𝐬𝐚𝐞𝐥 Early Career Fellow in Science and Technology at Harvey Mudd College and the Artistic Director of Super Collider LA. 𝐆𝐚𝐦𝐞 𝐒𝐭𝐨𝐧𝐞 is part of an evolving body of work tracing the material genealogy of computational devices. Isabel follows copper, a core element in digital infrastructure, back through histories of mining, ritual object, gaming stones, cult stones, and mythological cosmologies. The performance layers Greek mythology, prehistorical research, ritual practice, and contemporary extractive economies to ask, what are the deeper lineages of the devices we hold in our hands? If early tools, ritual objects, and spiritual technologies were once entangled, what does that history reveal about present-day computation? How do we understand digital devices not only as utility, but as part of a longer arc connecting spirituality, play, extraction, and asking how do we perform ritual and what is the link between spirituality and early tech devices, and what story does it tell for present-day computation? This is a work in process, an unfolding inquiry into material myth and computation. And I also want to mention that Isabel has an interactive piece up here that's like
touch the wall.
Yeah, touch the wall. I don't know if you want to explain that. You were explaining it to me earlier, but I couldn't comprehend all the layers of meaning that quickly.
I think it'll make more sense after I talk. Perfect. But basically, the amazing folks at Spectra helped me figure out how to layer some different versions of similar renders. So as you touch the wall, you're eroding the layers of video or animation that you're seeing and sort of revealing other scenes or other versions of that render. And in the piece, I was thinking about touch, both the impact that human touch can have on degrading environments, but then also the magical role that touch can play in creating new relationships. So it's just fun. It sounds way more fancy than it is, but
it's like a visual metaphor, interactive visual metaphor for this presentation. All right, well, with that, I'll leave it to Isabel.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks so much to Rip Space and Vera and Spectra, of course, for hosting us. I'm going to share with you some connections, questions, and associations that have emerged from my current research. I've been studying the materiality of computation and the rituals that we use to engage with computational tools. And this work and the talk you'll see today has emerged from field research that I've conducted over the last about year-long period, both on the island of Cyprus and in Greece. So today, to present this process to you, we will together embark on a journey, a story, if you will, and this is called 𝐆𝐚𝐴 𝐤𝐚𝐴. How do our rituals make our world? How do our rituals make the world? You're looking at two media objects from disparate moments in time, yet both are objects of ritual performance, both born of stone, both a portal to the beyond. On the left, we have a Cypriot seal depicting 3 aniconic cult stones, the Black Rock of Aphrodite, flanked by 2 other smaller stones. On the right, we have the data center, long rows of computer towers under an arched ceiling. With one, ancient Cypriots would dance, gather, invoke the beyond, and ask for protection of resources. With the other, we log on, we post, we download, and we ask for solutions. Or if you're in a secret server club, you do cooler things than that. One of these rituals would happen under an open sky, surrounded by trees, and the other oftentimes alone in the dark, save for the glowing buzz of a screen. We can trace the evolution of these media objects from the aniconic cult stone to the computer tower. Along the way, we find death, rebirth, extraction, beauty, envy, and worship. These cycles of evolution are driven by many things, one of which being the copper trade across time and evolutions in stone. Both of our stories today start with the Black Rock of Aphrodite. We will follow both of these loops together. Ritual 1, sky gaze, stargaze. This story begins on an island in the Mediterranean. Cyprus is sun-drenched, surrounded by glittering ocean water. In the Eastern Mediterranean, it has a long history of copper mining. It is also home to an indigenous deity known by many names, the great goddess, Kypris, and eventually, as we know her today, Aphrodite. She was worshipped for fertility, the protection of animals, and for the protection of Cyprus's precious resource, copper. Cyprus is littered with sites that evidence its long history of copper mining. One can tour the island exclusively through this lens, stopping at signs posted in the Troodos Mountains Geopark, dedicated to the many forms of copper deposits found in its interior. This copper was then traded all around the Mediterranean, particularly during the Bronze Age, as driven by the Roman Empire. The Romans sailed copper ingots around the Med, and the copper found its way into many Bronze Age objects, mirrors, hairpins, knives, and other tools. Similarly, the island is home to many sites dedicated to Kypris. These two entities, copper and the indigenous deity Kypris, have interwoven origin stories that are both influenced and impacted by colonizing forces on the island. Aphrodite lives like a ghost. She's everywhere on Cyprus, hidden by a bluff, a grotto, or a garden, each site hiding a fragment of a story about this shape-shifting deity. Both whimsical and banal, these sites miss the large crowds that often gather in pubs and vacation destinations like Paphos, Limassol, and Nicosia. They're markedly haunted by a light Mediterranean breeze, a quiet absence of tourists, and a sense of being forgotten. The sites of Aphrodite's lore are dotted across the island and really rooted in the materiality of the landscape. In soft waves of water against rock, in the long vines of a fig tree draping across a shaded pool, in the compacted soil of a salty coastal trail, or in the onyx conical cult stone of her worship. One of the first depictions or representations of this deity is the conical black stone. Now known as the Black Rock of Aphrodite, it sits in the museum at Pele Paphos, the sanctuary of Aphrodite on a hill overlooking the ocean. Also known as a beetle, the cult stone was an object of ritual performance. Often incorporated into Cypriot gatherings, the stone was performed with, as seen here in this Minoan seal. Cypriots would gather around the stone, dance with it, and lend animist qualities to the tall black rock. The cult stone was the heart of collective worship of Kypris over many millennia. But this goddess was also close to the people. Many iterations of small iconic figurines can be found throughout grave sites, home sites, and sanctuaries on the island. The exact depictions of the deity shifting over time in response to waves of foreign influence. We see her change from the goddess with the bird-like face, here on your left, through the bearded goddess to the goddess with upraised arms. I think it's important to pause here and pay attention to some of the earliest depictions of the deity of Kypris that reveal what I see as a queer ecological relationship between ancient Cypriots and their great goddess. For one, the earliest depictions of the deity hybridize human and animal forms. The great goddess depicted here as the bearded goddess was known to be genderqueer. Because the deity incorporated all genders, Cypriots saw this deity as being fully integrated and fully whole. The figurines also represent a multiplicity of deities all at once. Now, it's not useful, I don't think, to romanticize the cult worship of the past, but I wonder if we see a closeness here between humans, their gods, and the geologic and ecological realities that underpin their island life. As we see the depictions of the deity move farther away from the earlier queer ones, we also see a greater separation between human and ecological contexts. An understanding of Kypris as inherently queer opens the possibility for reorienting relationships, ones between humans, more than humans, and the objects and materials of their cultures. In this opening, the immediacy of the human resource dependence is more clear, and the need for worship of a copper deity more salient. Now, there have been many waves of foreign influence on the island of Cyprus that have impacted it throughout history, but perhaps none as totalizing as the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire exploded the copper trade, enslaved local Cypriots to mine and labor, and sent copper ingots, as mentioned, all over the Roman Empire. The economic fortitude of the Romans was supported in large part by the copper trade. They used copper for making bronze alloy, and the material made its way into many Roman-era tools and technologies. It was essential for creating piping for bathhouses and other plumbing systems. Many of the tools of the Roman era, like this bathing strigil, which is an oil scraper, were made from bronze, a copper alloy. And of course, it was used in the production of coins and physical monetary objects. But the Roman Empire created many forms of pollution. Culturally, the Catholicization of the Roman Empire violently eradicated many pagan rituals and prevented everyday citizens from using public bathhouses. It produced enormous amounts of environmental degradation, and through the comprehensive forces of the colonial project, homogenized once disparate societies. Evidence of Roman-era mining can still be seen throughout the Levant and the Mediterranean, from Italy, Greece, Jordan, Cyprus, and even southern France and Spain. The Roman era was the most polluting period on Earth until the Industrial Revolution, as evidenced by ice cores in Greenland. And this was in large part due to the poor techniques used in mining and smelting in the copper mining process. Still today, in the Wadi Finan in Jordan, pictured here, there's pollution from Roman-era mines that people today are contending with. And all of these activities really fueled the Bronze Age. On Cyprus, the Skoriotissa mine has been non-consecutively in operation since the Roman era. Tall slag heaps of copper excrement can be found along the edges of the open pit mine. On the northwestern edge of the Troodos Mountains, the mine towers over turquoise blue pools of wastewater. As a hazardous waste site, it is closed to the public, but through some Google Earth imagery and a personal guerrilla excursion to the edge of the mine, I managed to capture some volumetric data of the pit through a fence. It's an ironic parallel how the cool blue tones of the open pit water match the enticing beaches just miles away. The Roman era is also when Kypris, the queer Cypriot deity, became Aphrodite, or Venus, rising from the sea. As her name transformed, so did the depictions of her. The Greco-Roman story of Aphrodite's birth goes something like this. She floated in from the sea on the foam of ocean water on a beach near Paphos. Emerging from the waves, she became the goddess of love and beauty. Today, you can go visit her birthplace, a giant rock on the edge of the sea, seen here on the left. If you swim around the rock 3 times, it is said you will be lucky in love. Hasn't happened yet for me, but let's see how that one goes. The reason Kypris became integrated into the Greek mythological canon is entirely to do with copper. The cult of her worship, this great black rock, was situated at Paphos, which became the most important town for the copper trade during the Roman era. Copper was mined in the mountains and brought down to the sea, where it was sent across the Mediterranean. Because of the economic viability, over time, Paphos and its most beloved goddess, Kypris, thrived. As Kypris was adopted as Aphrodite, the visual depictions of her changed radically. From earlier forms of the bearded goddess to the goddess with upraised arms, to more representational forms of what seems to be a woman's face and body, eventually she became associated with what to us is a very well-known standard of beauty. Now, there's still evidence in Greek mythology of the queer remnants of Aphrodite's past. She is, after all, the mother of Hermaphroditus and linked to other queer stories in the Greek canon. But her gender fluid and geologic past becomes greatly obscured, at least in our common depictions of Venus or Aphrodite. But maybe some of this complexity has been lost to time. Evidence of her queer ecological origins are most clear in the mythological sites on Cyprus attributed to her life. in the baths where she was known to bathe with Adonis, a beautiful grotto surrounded by a magnolia tree seen in the form of a point cloud model on the right, or in the blazing sun over her sanctuary perched on a seaside cliff, or in the crystal blue water of her birthplace. One can imagine an ancient Cypriot gathering around a fire and a tall black stone, gazing up to the sky in ritual performance. Cypriots appealed to the beyond through a tall black rock in an open sky sanctuary. We appeal to the beyond through a black rock, humming with electricity, often from the comfort of our own homes. The second ritual, cult stone, game stone. Consulting the oracle, game stones, and storage media. While the ambiguity or ambivalence inherent in aniconic cult stones makes them uniquely challenging to identify and interpret, this quality is central to their ritual value, rendering them uniquely useful in strategies of social cohesion through accommodating multiple individual ritual experiences in the context of a shared ritual action. Sam Crooks here is speaking of the cult stone, but something similar could be said for the computer or the internet. The aniconic cult object then can be read as an earlier version of a number of media objects: gravestones, tablets, iconographic statues, eventually images, and storage towers. As John Durham Peters describes in The Marvelous Clouds, every civilization has been in the business of recording, transmitting, and processing data. Databases, broadly defined, are collective storage media and may include many forms of preservation, such as cemeteries, genealogies, temples, cairns, chanceries, and libraries. Gaming stones are found all over the island of Cyprus at sanctuaries and other sites of collective gathering. Used as devices for gaming in real life with one another, the stones occupied a similar but more playful role than the aniconic cult stone. Both objects become beacons of the beyond when played by the human. They bring forth omnipotent forces that we beg for mercy, protection, production, and love. The aniconic cult stone and gaming stones are precursors to the gravestone. Placed at the site of the burial of the dead, the gravestone was thought to literally be a house for the spirit. Inscribed with prayers and data, they asked the dead and the gods to play together. Grave sites with their stone monoliths are places where we, as living humans, perform mourning and grieving and reminiscing of loved ones. We return to them in order to remember. They are thresholds between what's alive, what is human, and what is supernatural. As we follow the media object forward, the objects move from analog to more digital, eventually enlivened by the electrically conductive metal, one of which being copper. But copper swirls around even our earliest objects of divining and dreaming, these storage and inscription media. From the Bronze Age water clock, the timekeeping device invented after the sundial that allowed for keeping time without sunlight, pictured here with this cool monkey on the front, to the Antikythera mechanism, which is often considered the first computer. It divined complex calendric cycles over long periods of time. You can see the copper patina here, feel the evidence of time in the presence of Cyprus's most precious metal. If we follow the cult stone then forward as a form of inscription media, we track the gravestone to the tablet, to paper, to the physical desk, and eventually our computer's digital desktop. Here is an image I love of the concept of the memics, described in Vannevar Bush's article, As We May Think. It says, in the form of a desk, this would instantly bring files and material on any subject to the operator's fingertips. A precursor to the digital desktop, the digital user interface, and at-home computational workstations that would include a keyboard, a mouse, and a digital screen that can pull up recorded information, something extremely familiar to all of us now. And eventually we get the cordless tablet. You can see how this progression continues. But all of these digital computation demands more computing power, larger devices, more storage capacity. Enter the data center. Cult stones, graveyards, and the data center are all media objects that harbor multiple ritual experiences, burying, ordering, storing, marking, memorizing, and memorializing. Data centers are an ordering of monolithic tombs of information and knowledge. They keep all that we cannot remember for a moment when we need to recall it. They're an offloading of power and energy, calling upon the beyond human to generate a point of access between us and the virtual. The Mare Nostrum Computing Center in Barcelona is even housed in an old church. Described as one of the most beautiful data centers in the world, it hums with activity under the repetition of arched windows surrounded by cold stone walls. You can tour Mare Nostrum data center virtually. And at first, to me, the juxtaposition of the cold metal against the warm green and red hues of the church's archways seemed like a glitch. Or perhaps it's more like an inversion. Trade stone for computer tower and open sky for church ceiling. Both invoke something beyond human. One calls for the protection of copper, and one for its unending extraction. If cult stones and grave sites generate social cohesion, there's evidence that the data center disrupts it, in both a material and geologic sense. Deep sea mining for rare earth metals that power all of our devices destroys the seabed. The Escondida mine in Chile, one of the largest copper mines on Earth in production today, has had devastating impacts on local water supply. And new data centers springing up, especially here in the US, promise but fail to create jobs, leading to cultural and economic deserts. Fueled by a race to develop the most advanced AI, major corporations ignore environmental and social costs of technology in pursuit of greatness. Now, to get a bit more personal, my sentiments here are not at all to demonize computation or machine learning. After all, I am a media artist. I even used some AI for creating some 3D models from images for this presentation. I have a different sort of provocation that I think is really in line with a lot of the other talks we've heard today and sentiments around how we think about these tools. I invoke a third ritual, one to remember Kypris. Remembering Kypris is not a gesture in romanticizing the cult worship, social dynamics, or cultures of the past, but it could be a flashlight, illuminating the rift created by global trade, colonization, industrialization, and capitalism that separates our technologic advances from a material and geologic reality. We make machines in our image, we read life into our computational devices. Computers are at once objects of material culture and spirit, technologic achievement and ambition, and mathematics and dreaming. As our tools become more computationally advanced, they harness increasingly mind-bending powers. They verge on the godlike. The atom bomb was earth-shattering in its devastation, inciting artists, philosophers, and politicians to develop entirely new ideas for living together. The internet and AI have rewritten social relationships. Both technologies have produced effects that are beyond human comprehension. They incite fear and awe. They complicate the barrier between the rational and the supernatural. To me, this sounds a lot like faith. Then data centers, computer desktops, and Cypriot aniconic cult stones are all material objects made magical through imagination and collective play. A rock turned into a god. So I'll leave you with a few questions. Where's our Kypris? To which gods do we pray as we carve up a parched earth and erect data centers like we once did stone sanctuaries? What small idols remind us of the water used by AI-based image generators and/or ChatGPT, to give some of the most commonly cited examples? Around what or who do we commune? Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel. That was so great. We're running a little behind, but maybe we have time for like one question.
We can skip.
Well, Kira has a question, so.
Yeah.
Do you want to ask it from over there?
The mind-bending powers of computation? I mean, I think it's pretty mind-bending to me, like the amounts of data that we can. Yeah, I don't know how else to expand on that other than I think a lot of the things that AI is starting to become capable of are things we couldn't imagine for a long time. And so that is mind-bending to me, to start to understand.
All right. Thanks again, Isabel. And up next is Alice Bucknell.